What happens when the one person you built your entire world for decides to burn it all down? Not with fire and rage, but with the quiet, sterile scratch of a pen on a contract. What do you do when the foundation of your life is sold out from under you by your own blood? For Samuel Sterling, a 72-year-old man whose hands were a roadmap of every nail he had ever hammered and every plank he had ever sawn, this question was not a hypothetical. It was the deafening silence in a home that was no longer his. Samuel's house wasn't just a structure of wood and bricks sitting on a half-acre of manicured lawn. It was a living diary. He had laid the foundation the year he married Sarah, his one and only love. The oak beams in the living room ceiling were hoisted into place the week they discovered she was pregnant with their son, Leo. He remembered the exact scent of the sawdust, the way the sun had slanted through the unfinished window frames, catching the motes of dust like 1,000 tiny, dancing stars. He had looked at Sarah's rounding belly and whispered to the sturdy wood, "You will keep them safe. You will hold all our laughter." And it had. The notch on the kitchen doorframe marked Leo's height from a wobbly toddler to a gangly teenager who ducked his head every time he passed through. The worn patch on the third step of the staircase was where Sarah would sit every morning, sipping her tea, her bare feet tucked beneath her. The faint, almost invisible scratch on the mantelpiece was from a year Leo, at age 7, tried to hang his own clumsily made stocking with a bent nail. Every flaw was a memory. Every creak of the floorboards was a footstep from the past. Now, with Sarah gone 5 years, the house was more than just a home. It was his last tangible connection to her, to the life they had built together. It was his sanctuary and his purpose. He would spend his days tending to it, polishing the brass fixtures until they gleamed, oiling the deck he and Sarah had built for summer evenings, and talking to the walls as if they could talk back. They were the only ones who truly remembered everything, just like him. His son, Leo, did not understand. He couldn't. Leo, now a man of 45, lived in a world of glass towers and quarterly reports. He was a real estate developer, a man who saw properties not as homes, but as assets on a spreadsheet. He wore suits that cost more than Samuel's monthly pension and spoke in a language of leverage and market value. He visited every few weeks, his expensive car a stark intrusion in the quiet, tree-lined street. Each visit was the same. He would walk through the house with a polite but palpable impatience, his eyes scanning for imperfections not with a craftsman's care, but with a developer's critique. "Dad, this place is a dinosaur," he'd say, running a finger over the hand-carved banister. "The wiring is ancient. The plumbing is probably on its last legs. You should let me find you a nice, modern condo. Secure, no maintenance, everything new." Samuel would just shake his head, his smile gentle but firm. "This house and I are old together, Leo. We understand each other. It doesn't need to be new. It just needs to be loved." But Leo didn't hear the word love. He only heard old. He saw his father, a man with calloused hands and a quiet life, as another problem to be managed, another asset to be liquidated for a more efficient return. The tension was a low hum between them, the unspoken conflict between memory and ambition. Samuel, in his gentle way, thought his love for the home was a fortress, an unbreachable wall against Leo's relentless modernity. He believed that the story written into the very grain of the wood was powerful enough to protect itself. He was wrong. The love was a fortress, but he had given the key to the one person who saw it only as a cage. The first tremor came in a plain white envelope, which Samuel dismissed as another credit card offer and tossed onto the small pile of mail on the kitchen counter. Life continued its quiet rhythm. He pruned the roses Sarah had planted, fixed a sticky lock on the back door, and fell asleep in his favorite armchair, the scent of old wood and lemon oil a comforting blanket. A week later, the doorbell rang. A bright, cheerful woman stood on his porch, a leather-bound tablet in her hand, with a well-dressed couple standing just behind her. "Mr. Sterling? Hi, I'm Jessica from Prime Properties. We're just here for the 2 o'clock viewing. Is this a good time?" Samuel blinked, his mind struggling to connect the words. "Viewing? I think there's been a mistake. My house isn't for sale. Jessica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She tapped on her tablet. Oh, the listing is quite active. See. She turned the screen towards him. And there it was. His home. A gallery of professionally taken photographs showcased his living room, his kitchen, his bedroom. The description was a collage of sterile keywords. Charming vintage property, prime lot for redevelopment, motivated seller, motivated seller. The words felt like a physical blow. His hands, usually so steady, began to tremble. No, he whispered. This is wrong. He excused himself, his heart hammering against his ribs, and walked on unsteady legs to the phone in the hall. He dialed Leo's number. His son picked up on the second ring, his voice brisk and distracted. Hey, Dad. I'm just heading into a meeting. Can I call you back? Leo. Samuel's voice was hoarse. There are people here. They think the house is for sale. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A silence that stretched for a beat too long. And in that silence, Samuel's world fractured. Oh, Leo finally said, his voice losing its corporate warmth, replaced by a cool, practiced resignation. Right. That's today. I forgot to mention it. Samuel's voice cracked. Leo, what have you done? The admission came, not with an apology, but with the chilling logic of a business transaction. Dad, listen to me. It's for your own good. I told you this place was a liability. I've already accepted an incredible offer, way above market value. The deal is solid. It's closing in 2 weeks. The receiver felt impossibly heavy in Samuel's hand. The world tilted, the familiar hallway seeming to warp around him. He had given Leo power of attorney years ago, after a minor health scare. It was a document of trust, a fail-safe for emergencies. He never imagined the emergency would be his own son's greed. You used the power of attorney, Samuel stated, the words tasting like ash. To sell my home, my life. I used it to secure your future. Leo's voice was sharp now, defensive. It was an emergency. You were rotting away in that dusty museum, refusing to move on. I did what had to be done. It's a done deal, Dad. It's time to be practical. The word was a knife. Samuel looked around the hall, at the faint pencil mark where he'd measured Leo for his first school uniform, at the worn runner on the floor that Sarah had picked out. None of it was practical. It was life. It was love. And his son, the boy he had built this world for, had just sold it for parts. He hung up the phone without another word, the dial tone a shrill scream in the sudden, crushing silence of his home. The days that followed were a blur of hollowed-out moments. The house, once his sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. Every object was a fresh wound. The coffee mug Sarah had given him, the one with the chipped rim, seemed to mock him from the shelf. The worn armchair in the living room felt cold, its familiar embrace gone. He would walk from room to room, a ghost in his own life, touching the walls as if trying to absorb the memories before they were scrubbed clean by strangers. He'd stop at the height chart on the kitchen doorframe, his fingers tracing the pencil lines that marked a life's progression. 5 years old to 16, he could almost see the bright, eager face of the boy who had stood there, impatient to see how much he'd grown. Where did that boy go? When did his heart become so hard, his eyes so blind to everything that mattered? The silence was the worst part. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. The house used to have a voice. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the groan of the pipes, the whisper of the wind through the old eaves. Now, all Samuel could hear was the ticking clock on the mantelpiece, counting down the seconds until his eviction. He felt invisible, discarded, an inconvenient relic in his son's shiny, new world. Leo had arranged everything with ruthless efficiency. Movers were scheduled. A small, sterile apartment in a senior living complex was waiting. It was clean, modern, and utterly devoid of soul. It was a waiting room for the end of a life. One evening, Samuel found himself in the attic, surrounded by dusty boxes and forgotten treasures. He opened a trunk, and the scent of lavender and old paper filled the air. Inside were Sarah's things, her wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue paper, bundles of letters they had written to each other during their courtship, and beneath it all, a small, velvet-covered photo album. He sat on the floor, the single bare bulb casting long shadows, and turned the pages. There was Sarah, radiant on their wedding day. There was a picture of him, young and strong, standing on the bare foundation of the house, a hammer in his hand and a grin on his face. And then a photo of him holding a tiny, bundled Leo, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated awe. He was looking down at his son with a love so fierce it felt like it could shape the world. He had tried to shape a world for that boy, a world of safety, love, and integrity. And he had failed. He had failed Sarah. A wave of despair, so profound it stole his breath, washed over him. He closed the album, the weight of his grief a physical pressure in his chest. This was it. This was the end. He was just an old man who had outlived his usefulness, whose own son saw him as nothing more than a burden. He would move into that white, empty apartment and fade away. But as he sat there in the dusty silence, something else began to stir within him. It started as a flicker, a tiny spark in the vast darkness of his sorrow. It was anger, a cold, clear, diamond-hard anger. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage of a younger man. It was the slow-burning, focused fury of a master craftsman who sees his life's work being disrespected and dismantled. He looked down at his hands. They were old, wrinkled, and stained with the memory of 1,000 projects. But they were still strong. They still knew how to build, and they still knew how to take things apart. His gaze drifted to a corner of the attic, to a long, cardboard tube covered in dust. He reached for it, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled off the plastic cap and unrolled the contents onto the floor. The blueprints for the house. His own handwriting, neat and precise, detailed every beam, every pipe, every wire. He had designed it, built it, maintained it for 50 years. He knew its every secret. He knew the hidden spaces behind the walls, the quirks of the plumbing, the unique pathways of the electrical circuits he had laid himself. He had built this house to be a sanctuary, a fortress of love. But a fortress has defenses. It has hidden passages. It has secrets known only to its creator. Leo saw a building. Leo saw an asset. Leo had no idea what he had truly sold. A new feeling began to displace the grief. It was not hope, not yet. It was resolve, a quiet, steamy resolve that settled deep in his bones. He would not fade away in a sterile apartment. He was Samuel Sterling. He was a builder, and his son was about to learn a lesson about the true value of a home, a lesson written in wood, wire, and stone. His grief had not broken him. It had forged him into something new. He was no longer just a father. He was an architect, and he was about to design his masterpiece. Samuel's transformation was silent and methodical. The shuffling, grief-stricken old man disappeared, replaced by the focused artisan he had always been. He moved through the house with a renewed purpose, his footsteps light and sure. His workshop, which had been gathering dust in the basement, hummed back to life. The scent of sawdust and machine oil once again filled the air, a familiar perfume that cleared his mind and steadied his hands. He was no longer mourning a loss. He was preparing a battlefield. His plan was not one of crude destruction. That would be a betrayal of his own work, a desecration of Sarah's memory. No, his revenge would be a thing of beauty and precision. It would be an education. He would not destroy the house. He would make it speak. He would force it to reveal its true nature, and in doing so, reveal his son's profound and fraudulent ignorance. He started with the plumbing. In the guest bathroom, he spent an afternoon making a minute adjustment to a custom valve he had installed decades ago. It was a piece of his own design, created to equalize pressure between the hot and cold water lines. With a few careful turns of a specialized key he had forged himself, the valve was now set to create a low, intermittent humming sound, a ghostly thrum that would only occur when the hot water was run for more than 3 minutes. It was a sound that would travel through the copper pipes, resonating within the walls of the master bedroom on the floor above. It was untraceable to a standard plumber, who would check for vibrations and pressure drops and find nothing amiss. Only the man who had built the valve would know how to silence it. Next, he turned his attention to the electricity. In his study, a room paneled with dark cherry wood he had reclaimed from an old library, there was a particular wall outlet. He had wired this room himself with extra grounding for his sensitive drafting equipment. He spent hours carefully rewiring that one outlet, creating a bypass circuit linked to a tiny heat-sensitive resistor he embedded deep within the wall. Now, if any device drawing more than a specific wattage, say a modern, high-power computer, was plugged in, the resistor would heat up and trip a secondary, hidden breaker, cutting power to that single outlet. A standard electrician would test the outlet, find it dead, check the main breaker box in the basement, and see nothing tripped. They would be stumped. The only way to reset it was to access a small, hidden panel disguised as a piece of decorative molding next to the fireplace. A panel only Samuel knew existed. His most ingenious work, however, involved the very structure of the house. When he'd built the foundation, he discovered a small, underground spring at the corner of the property. Instead of fighting it, he had incorporated it. He designed a clever French drain system that channeled the water away, but he also built a small, stone-lined cistern in a hidden sub-basement, accessible only through a trapdoor concealed beneath a large flagstone in the wine cellar. This cistern provided a natural, passive cooling system for the cellar and, in theory, could be used for garden irrigation. He had never needed it, so he had sealed the access and forgotten about it. Now he unsealed it. He then spent a day meticulously drafting a new document. He went to the county records office, a place he hadn't visited in 50 years, and spent hours poring over the original plat maps for his property. He found what he was looking for, a tiny, almost forgotten utility easement just 6 inches wide that ran along the edge of his property. It had been granted to the city for a long-since-removed telegraph line. It was legally still in effect, but practically useless. With the help of an old semi-retired surveyor he knew, he legally and officially redeeded a minuscule, 1-foot-wide strip of his own land, directly adjacent to the old easement, back to himself under a newly created trust named the Sarah Sterling Legacy. This strip of land was insignificant, a sliver of lawn. But it just so happened to contain the only access point to the main water shut-off valve for the entire property. Without access to that 1-foot strip, you could not legally turn off the water to the house from the street. It was a brilliant, legalistic trap hidden in plain sight. Finally, he began to research the buyer. Leo had mentioned her name in his cold, triumphant phone call, Eleanor Vance. A quick search online revealed a great deal. Mrs. Vance was not some new-money fool. She was the widow of a renowned architect, a patron of the arts, and sat on the board of a historical preservation society. She was known for her discerning eye, her appreciation for quality, and her intolerance for charlatans. She wasn't just buying a property. She was buying a story, a piece of history. This was the final piece of his puzzle. She was not the enemy. She was the audience. She was the catalyst who would, he hoped, appreciate the masterpiece even as it confounded her. He worked tirelessly, fueled by coffee and a righteous fury. When the movers finally arrived, Samuel was ready. He stood aside, a mask of weary resignation on his face, playing the part of the defeated old man to perfection. Leo was there, overseeing the process with brisk efficiency, his gaze occasionally flicking to his father with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "It's for the best, Dad," he said, clapping a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "You'll be so much more comfortable." Samuel just nodded, his eyes empty. But inside, the craftsman was smiling. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The play was about to begin. He let them pack his life into boxes and drive him to the cold, soulless apartment. He watched his son leave, the triumphant smile on Leo's face a mask of ignorance. Leo thought he had closed the deal. He had no idea he had just opened Pandora's box. The first few weeks passed in a triumphant haze for Leo. He had successfully divested his father of a depreciating asset, turning it into a significant sum of liquid cash that he now managed. The commission from the sale alone was substantial. He had proven his business acumen, his ability to make tough, unsentimental decisions for the greater good. He saw himself as a savior, rescuing his father from the clutches of a decaying past. The guilt he felt was a dull, manageable ache, easily soothed by the crisp numbers on his bank statement. He had installed his father in the best suite at the Oakwood Senior Residences. It was all clean lines, beige walls, and large, picture windows that looked out onto a meticulously manicured and utterly soulless courtyard. Samuel, for his part, played his role with quiet dignity. He was compliant, passive, the very picture of a man whose spirit had been broken. He ate his meals in the communal dining hall, nodded politely to the other residents, and spent hours sitting by his window, seemingly lost in thought. Leo would visit once a week, his visits brief and self-congratulatory. "See, Dad? Isn't this better? No leaky roofs to worry about, no lawn to mow. You could just relax," Samuel would offer a weak smile. "It's very clean, Leo." The word hung in the air, sterile and damning. But Leo was deaf to its undertones. He heard only acquiescence. Meanwhile, Eleanor Vance moved into her new home. From the moment she first walked through the door as its owner, she was enchanted. She was a woman who understood bones, the structure and soul of a place. She had lived her life surrounded by design, and she recognized the hand of a master in the perfect joinery of the window frames, the elegant sweep of the staircase, the solid, reassuring feel of the doors. This wasn't a house built by a committee or a contractor. It was built by a man who loved his materials. She spent her first days simply inhabiting the space, learning its rhythms, the way the light moved through the rooms from dawn till dusk. She planned a gentle restoration, a polishing of the gem she had acquired. Then the quirks began. The first was the humming. It started in the master bedroom, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It only happened late at night, when she would take a long, hot bath before bed. It was just loud enough to be unsettling, a ghost in the machine of the house. She called a plumber, a highly recommended man with decades of experience. He spent a full day checking pipes, measuring pressure, and listening with sophisticated acoustic equipment. He found nothing. "I've never seen anything like it, Mrs. Vance," he confessed, wiping his brow. "The pressure is perfect. There are no vibrations in the pipes. It's like the sound is just there. And then it's not." Next came the light in the study. Eleanor had turned the beautiful, cherry-paneled room into her personal office, setting up her powerful desktop computer on the antique desk. But every time she powered it on, after about 5 minutes of work, the outlet would simply go dead. The lamp on her desk would go out. Her computer screen would turn black. Yet the other lights in the room remained on. She called an electrician. He tested the outlet and found it had no power. He checked the main breaker box in the basement, a modern panel that Leo had proudly pointed out as a recent upgrade. No breakers were tripped. He replaced the outlet itself, then the wiring leading to it. Still, the problem persisted. "It's baffling," the electrician said, shaking his head. "The circuit is dead, but there's no logical reason for it. It's as if a switch is being thrown somewhere, but there's no switch." The final straw was the draft. It was a cold, persistent sliver of air in the wine cellar. It made the space, which she had intended to stock with her late husband's collection, unpleasantly chilly. Again, she brought in experts. They sealed every window, checked every mortar joint. The draft remained, a cold breath from an unknown source. Eleanor Vance was a patient woman, but she was not a fool. These were not the charming eccentricities of an old house. They were specific, confounding, and systematic failures. A deep sense of unease began to settle over her. She had paid a premium for this property, assured by its handsome young seller, Leo Sterling, that it was in pristine condition, a turnkey piece of history. Her mind, sharp and analytical from years of managing foundations and assessing artistic works, began to connect the dots. The problems were too precise, too localized. It felt less like decay and more like a design. A very, very clever design. Her respect for the house's original builder grew, but so did her suspicion of the man who had sold it to her. Her perception of Leo shifted. The charming, ambitious developer now seemed slick, evasive. Akuman. She sat in her silent study, silent because she couldn't use her computer, and pulled up the file on the sale. She reviewed the disclosures, the inspection reports Leo had provided. It was all clean, perfect, almost too perfect. No mention of any custom plumbing, No non-standard electrical work, no notes about the foundation. She decided to do what she did best. She began her own research. She would uncover the history of this house and the story of the man who built it. Unbeknownst to her, she was about to receive a little help. Miles away, in his quiet apartment, Samuel Sterling picked up a payphone in the lobby of his building. He dialed a number he had found online, the office of a man named Arthur Finch, a semi-retired architectural historian renowned for his work on mid-century residential craftsmanship. Samuel disguised his voice, making it sound frail and a little shaky. "Hello," he rasped. "I'm calling with a tip from Mr. Finch. Tell him to look into the property at 127 Willow Lane, the old Sterling house. There's a unique structural feature in the sub-basement, a custom-built cistern and passive cooling system. A real piece of artisanal engineering. It would be a shame if a new owner didn't understand what they had." He hung up before the person on the other end could ask any questions. The bait was laid. The house had started to speak, and now someone was finally coming to listen. Arthur Finch was a man who lived for puzzles. A retired professor of architectural history, he now took on only the most interesting private consultations. The anonymous tip about the Sterling house piqued his curiosity. The phrase artisanal engineering was a specific and enticing lure. He contacted Mrs. Vance, introducing himself and mentioning the anonymous call. For Eleanor, this was a startling confirmation of her own suspicions. Someone else knew the house had secrets. She immediately agreed to let him conduct a full architectural survey. "Find everything, Mr. Finch," she said, her voice firm. "I want to know every secret this house is keeping." Arthur arrived a few days later, a small team and an array of sophisticated equipment in tow. He was a small, bird-like man with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He didn't start with the basement, as the tip had suggested. He started at the front door with the house as a whole. He ran his hands over the woodwork. He tapped on the walls. He studied the flow of the rooms. "The man who built this wasn't just a carpenter," he murmured to Eleanor after the first hour. "He was a composer. This house has a rhythm." He spent 2 days mapping the house, his team using thermal imagers and sonic scanners. They found the source of the hum. The thermal camera showed a slight heat variation in the pipes leading from the guest bathroom, but only when hot water had been running for precisely 3 minutes. Arthur, using a fiber optic scope, fished a camera into the wall and found the custom valve. He was delighted. "My dear Mrs. Vance, this is no flaw," he exclaimed, his eyes alight. "This is a bespoke pressure regulator of a kind I've only ever read about. It's been deliberately miscalibrated. It's designed to be tuned like a musical instrument." Next, they tackled the study. The electricians had failed because they were looking for a failure. Arthur was looking for a design. He ignored the outlet and focused on the room itself. He noted the exquisite cherry paneling and the craftsmanship of the fireplace mantel. His fingers, trained to find irregularities, traced the decorative molding next to the hearth. He felt a tiny, almost imperceptible seam. He pressed gently. A small section of the molding clicked open, revealing a hidden panel with a single, unlabeled reset switch. He flipped it. In the corner, the lamp on Eleanor's desk flickered on. Arthur let out a small laugh of pure joy. "It's a dedicated circuit with a custom safety trip. You must have used sensitive equipment in here." This wasn't a bug. It was a feature. An incredibly elegant 1-inch finally. They descended into the wine cellar. They located the source of the draft, a small, cleverly disguised ventilation duct leading from behind a wine rack. It wasn't a leak. It was an intake. It led them to the large flagstone in the center of the floor. With some effort, they lifted it, revealing a cast-iron ring. They pulled, and a heavy trapdoor opened onto a set of stone steps leading down into darkness. Arthur shone a powerful flashlight down into the space. There, just as the tipster had promised, was a beautifully constructed stone cistern, cool and dry, with a complex system of channels leading from the foundation. Magnificent, Arthur breathed. A passive geothermal cooling system. It uses the underground spring water to regulate the cellar's temperature. That draft is part of the convection cycle, but it was what they found next that changed everything. Tucked into a small, Dry niche in the cistern wall was a sealed copper cylinder. Arthur carefully retrieved it and opened it. Inside, preserved perfectly, was a letter written on old, heavy draftsman's paper. The handwriting was strong and clear. It was dated 50 years ago. "To my Sarah," it began. "I finished it. I know it's just a house, just wood and nails and pipes. But I hope, when you walk through these rooms, you feel what I felt when I built them. I put all my love for you and the son we are about to have into every joint and every beam. I have built it to be strong, to keep you safe. I have built it to be smart, with a few of my own little tricks to make it last forever. This is my promise to you, written in stone and wood. It is our story. It was signed. Your loving husband, Samuel Sterling." Eleanor read the letter, and tears welled in her eyes. The house was not just a structure. It was a love letter. The flaws were not problems. They were the little tricks of a genius craftsman, a secret language between him and his home. And the man who had sold it to her, the man who carried the builder's name, was utterly ignorant of it all. The full picture snapped into focus with chilling clarity. She had been deceived, not just about the condition of the house, but about its very soul. Arthur Finch delivered his final report. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice filled with a reverence she now shared, "you have not purchased a house with problems. You have purchased a puzzle box, a masterpiece of residential craftsmanship built by a man named Samuel Sterling. And I believe," he added, his eyes meeting hers, "that someone has been deliberately and brilliantly showing you how to open it." The anger that had been simmering in Eleanor now blazed into a cold, controlled fire. She felt a profound, unexpected kinship with the unseen builder, Samuel Sterling. And she felt a burning fury toward his son. Leo Sterling had not just committed fraud. He had committed a form of desecration. He had sold a legacy he didn't have the wit to understand or the character to deserve. She picked up her phone. "Leo," she said, her voice as smooth and hard as polished granite when he answered. "We need to have a meeting. Tomorrow. At the house. And Leo, bring your father." The air in the living room was thick with unspoken tension. Light streamed through the large windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silence. Leo Sterling stood near the fireplace, a forced, charming smile plastered on his face. He felt a prickle of unease. Eleanor Vance had been cryptic on the phone, but her tone had been anything but friendly. He had tried to dismiss it as the fussiness of a rich widow, but seeing her now, her expression calm and unreadable, his confidence began to waver. He had brought his father, as requested. Samuel sat in his old armchair, the one the movers had left at Eleanor's specific instruction. He was dressed not in the drab, issued clothing of the senior residents, but in his old, clean work clothes, sturdy denim trousers, and a soft, faded chambray shirt. He looked as if he belonged there, a part of the house itself. He was quiet, his hands resting on the worn arms of the chair, his gaze steady. The defeated, vacant look was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable dignity. Leo felt a surge of irritation. His father's presence felt like an accusation. "Eleanor," Leo began, his voice exuding practiced sincerity, "I was so sorry to hear you've been having a few issues with the house. As I said on the phone, old homes can be temperamental. I'm happy to have my best contractors come in and sort everything out on my dime." Of course, Eleanor let the silence stretch for a moment before she spoke. Her voice was low and even. "There will be no need for your contractors, Leo. I've already had the house thoroughly assessed by Mr. Arthur Finch. Perhaps you've heard of him? He's a leading authority on architectural history." Leo's smile tightened. He had heard of Finch. The man was a legend and notoriously expensive. This was not good. "Mr. Finch found some remarkable things," Eleanor continued, her eyes fixed on Leo. "For instance, he discovered that the humming in the bedroom was not a flaw, but a custom-designed pressure valve that had been deliberately miscalibrated. He also found the source of the electrical issue in the study. It seems there's a hidden safety trip, a feature, not a bug, designed to protect a dedicated circuit. A feature you failed to disclose." Leo's face began to pale. He opened his mouth to speak, to bluster his way through it, But Eleanor held up a hand. He also found a draft in the wine cellar, she went on, her voice relentless. It wasn't a leak. It was part of an ingenious passive cooling system, fed by a hidden cistern built into the subbasement. A brilliant piece of engineering, completely absent from your inspection reports. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. She walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a clear, protective sleeve containing a single sheet of paper. It was the letter. But the most interesting thing he found was this, she said, her voice softening as she looked at Samuel. A letter from the home's builder to his wife. A letter that speaks of his love, his dreams, and the little tricks he built into the walls to make it last forever. She turned her gaze back to Leo, and it was as sharp as broken glass. You didn't sell me a house, Leo. You sold me a story you didn't even know how to read. You sold a legacy you had no right to. You stood in this room and praised its vintage charm while being utterly, profoundly ignorant of the genius within its walls. You didn't just misrepresent the property. You committed an act of gross negligence and profound disrespect. Leo was stunned into silence. The blood had drained from his face. He looked from Eleanor's furious eyes to his father's calm, knowing expression. The truth crashed down on him. This wasn't a series of coincidences. It was a setup, a deliberate, meticulous, and humiliating trap. His father, his quiet, gentle, old-fashioned father had done this. He had outmaneuvered him, outsmarted him, using the very house Leo had despised. You, he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Samuel. You did this. Samuel met his son's gaze. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep, abiding sorrow. I built this house, Leo, he said, his voice quiet but resonant in the still room. I know its every secret. You tried to sell its body, but you could never sell its soul. Because you never knew it was there, the accusation, spoken so simply, was more devastating than any shout. It laid bare the chasm between them, the fundamental difference in what they valued. Leo, the man of finance and slick deals, was revealed as a fool, a shallow man duped by a history he was too arrogant to learn. He had seen only lumber and land, and had missed the art, the love, the very magic of the place. He had tried to liquidate a masterpiece as if it were common stock. Leo's mind raced, desperately searching for an exit, a way to spin this. He could deny it, claim his father was delusional, that this was all a misunderstanding. He could threaten legal action of his own. But as he looked at Eleanor Vance's resolute face, he knew he was checkmated. She was a woman of immense wealth and influence. A public battle with her, with the famed Arthur Finch as her star witness, would be career suicide. The story was too good, too damning. The greedy son who sold his master craftsman father's life's work, only to be exposed by the house itself. It would ruin him. This is absurd. He finally managed, his voice thin and reedy. I acted in my father's best interests, using a legal power of attorney, a power of attorney you abused. Eleanor cut in sharply. Which brings me to my final point. She walked over to a leather briefcase on the coffee table and pulled out a thick file. My lawyers have been quite busy, Leo. They were very interested in Mr. Finch's report. Selling a property with numerous complex, undisclosed systems that require specialized knowledge to operate, while claiming it is a simple, turnkey residence, constitutes a significant misrepresentation. It's a clear basis for voiding the sale on the grounds of fraud by omission. Leo felt a wave of nausea. She was going to sue him. The scandal, the legal fees, it would be catastrophic. But it gets better, Eleanor said, a grim smile touching her lips. She pulled out a large, rolled-up document. It was a property survey map. She spread it across the coffee table. My legal team also did a thorough title search, and they found this. She pointed to a thin, red line running along the edge of the property. This is a 1-foot-wide parcel of land. It was recently and legally deeded to a trust, the Sarah Sterling Legacy Trust. She looked up at Samuel, a flicker of deep respect in her eyes, before turning back to Leo. This insignificant-looking strip of land contains the sole access point to the municipal water main shut-off valve for this entire property. Without legal access to this strip of land, one cannot perform emergency or routine maintenance on the water supply. A rather crucial detail for a homeowner, wouldn't you agree? The trap was fully sprung. It was brilliant. It was legal. It was devastating. His father had not only laid a series of clever practical traps within the house, but he had also laid a legal landmine on the property itself. A landmine Leo had walked right over. He was completely, utterly cornered. "What do you want?" Leo whispered, the fight draining out of him. All his ambition, all his carefully constructed self-importance, crumbled into dust. He was just a boy who had been profoundly outmatched by his father. Eleanor's expression was implacable. "This was never about money for me, Leo. It was about principle. It's about honoring the work and the love that is soaked into the walls of this place. A love you so callously discarded." She closed the file with a soft, final thud. "So here are my terms. There is no negotiation. You will sign a document, which my lawyer has already prepared, agreeing to void the sale completely. You will return every single penny of my money, including any commissions or fees you have collected, within 24 hours. In return, I will not pursue legal action for fraud, and this entire embarrassing episode will remain a private matter." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "Or you can refuse, and I will spend a fraction of my fortune to publicly dismantle your reputation, your career, and your future. I will sue you for fraud. I will file a complaint with the real estate board, and I will make sure the story of what you did to your father is told in every newspaper in the city. The choice is yours." There was no choice. It was ruin or retreat. Humiliation was bitter, but it was survivable. The alternative was not. Leo looked at his father, who was watching him not with triumph, but with a profound and heartbreaking disappointment. In that moment, Leo understood that he had lost more than a deal. He had lost his past, his integrity, and the last shred of his father's respect. He had traded his soul for a spreadsheet, and the numbers had come up empty. With a shaking hand, he reached for the pen Eleanor offered him. "I agree," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The sound of his signature on the document was the sound of his world breaking. It was the sound of justice, quiet and absolute. It was the sound of a son's betrayal being undone by a father's unwavering love, not for the son he had, but for the home he had built. A week later, Samuel Sterling walked back through his front door. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was a peaceful silence, a welcoming one. The air smelled of lemon oil and old wood, just as it always had. Eleanor Vance was waiting for him in the living room, the keys to the house resting on the mantelpiece. She had overseen the transfer of funds and the signing of the final papers. Leo had vanished, retreating to lick his wounds and reckon with the consequences of his actions. Samuel hadn't heard from him, and he wasn't sure if he ever would. "It's yours again, Samuel," Eleanor said, her smile warm and genuine. She picked up the keys and held them out to him. "This house needs its creator." Samuel took them, the cool metal a familiar and reassuring weight in his palm. His hand, the one that had built this place, closed around them. "I don't know how to thank you, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this." "Oh, I think I did," she replied. "I'm a patron of the arts, Samuel. And this," she said, gesturing to the room around them, "is a work of art. It deserves to be protected and celebrated." She paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "Which brings me to a proposal. I've been thinking, a man with your skill, your vision, you shouldn't be retired. Your knowledge is too valuable to be locked away." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with an idea. "I want to establish a foundation, the Sarah and Samuel Sterling Foundation for Artisanal Craftsmanship. It would be dedicated to preserving the skills you possess, teaching a new generation of builders and artisans how to create things with integrity and soul. We could use this house as a teaching model. I would provide the funding, all of it. All I would ask is that you be its head, its master craftsman." Samuel was speechless. He had fought to reclaim his past, to hold on to the memory of a life he had built. He had never imagined it could become a future. To teach, to share his knowledge, to pass on his legacy not just to one son who didn't want it, but to many who did. It was more than justice. It was a resurrection. He would no longer be just an old man in a house full of memories. He would be a teacher, a mentor. The house would not be a silent museum, but a living, breathing workshop filled with the sounds of creation once more. Yes, Samuel said, a slow smile spreading across his face, a smile that reached his eyes for the first time in a very long time. Yes, I would like that very much. The final scene is not one of endings, but of new beginnings. Months have passed. The house is alive. In the workshop, Samuel, his face animated and his hands steady, is guiding the hands of a young apprentice, showing her how to plane a piece of wood until it is perfectly smooth. The sound of sanding and gentle hammering drifts up into the kitchen, where another small group of students is gathered around Eleanor, who is pointing out the genius of the hand-cut dovetail joints on the cabinet doors. The house is no longer just Samuel's sanctuary. It is a school, a beacon, a testament to the idea that the things we build with love have a power that can never be sold, only shared. So, I ask you this. What is the true foundation of your life? Is it built on things that can be bought and sold, things that can be appraised and liquidated? Or is it built on something more enduring, on love, on integrity, on the memories you create and the legacy you leave in the hearts of others? True wealth is not found in a bank account. It is found in the lives you touch and the beauty you build with your own two hands. Don't ever let anyone tell you that what you've built with love is worthless. Remind someone today that their legacy, the story they have built, is precious. Share this story if you believe that the best things in life are not things at all, but the love and care we pour into them. Because in the end, that is the only inheritance that truly matters.